Welcome to another episode of Emerald Echo, a Green Lantern podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, Donnie. Donnie, how's it going?
What's up, Lantern fans? It's the man who once had dinner at the Hand Family Funeral Home. It's the Emerald Enthusiast.
I wouldn't be eating at a funeral home if it was me, but by
Well,
all
I
means,
thought I'd give you a little bit of Halloween flavor.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, even though by the time people are hearing this, it'll probably be Halloween will have come and gone, but it's still the effect is there, and you can take the audio soundbite and use it next Halloween. But yeah, got a little bit of Paul Bearer kind of flavor there too, to quote some wrestling, which I'll get back to later in our review today. But we are going to continue our deep dive into Kyle Rayner's time as Green Lantern. I mean, he still is technically Green Lantern, but his time as the main eventer, let's say, to keep the wrestling theme going. So we're going to be continuing our series of reviews on that. But we do have some brief news bits to go over. So let's get to it. First up, what do we got, Donnie? Where do you want to start?
Now we have some idea of what the Green Lantern HBOMax series is going to look like, and that the characters that will headline that show are Guy Gardner, Jessica Cruz, Simon Baz, and Alan Scott. So what's your opinion of that, Adam?
Well, I mean, in terms of those characters headlining, I think it's an interesting mix of characters. I love that the OG kind of Green Lantern is getting some love and going to be featured in here. Of course, the news that Jessica is going to be prominent. It makes a ton of sense. That character is really breaking out, and I couldn't be happier. And then, of course, where Jessica goes, usually Phil Bova's favorite Simon follows. That's going to be my running joke. Sorry, Phil. I love you, buddy, but I'm gonna have fun with that for as long as I can ride it out. And of course, we've also heard Kilowog is present, which you have to have Kilowog, right? I mean, right. He's like, yeah. And then Sinestro, which here's one barometer where somebody's going to have a tough act to follow. Good luck to whoever they cast following up Mark Strong, because Mark Strong was fantastic. But I love the character of Sinestro, and I'm assuming we're going to see him as a Green Lantern to start the series at least.
Well, I would say it's hard to do the Green Lantern story without Sinestro, especially if we're getting the Green Lantern Corps introduced somewhere, whether he's in the Corps and he has yet to turn against them or he's already their greatest enemy. Sinestro has to be there somewhere.
Yeah. But the character's great. One of DC's best villains, per se, for sure. But also, I think when he had his, the instances we've seen him in quote unquote hero mode. I sound like a video game creator, but the few times we've seen him in hero mode, I've liked him as a Green Lantern too. So he's a great character. So it's really a great mix. I know some people are upset that their favorite aren't there, but I mean, hopefully the hope is that this show is going to be really good, and the hope is that it'll last multiple seasons. And there are plenty of Green Lanterns to use from the comics, and with new seasons comes the opportunity to explore new lanterns. So fret not, and just support the show when it arrives. Give it a fair shake, and let's see if we can be supportive enough to get this to a second and third and so on and so forth season.
I would wholeheartedly agree. I mean, it's been so long since we got any Green Lantern-centric character in live action. Now that we have this, let's not be ungrateful. Let's see how it unfolds, and hopefully all the characters that have headlined Green Lantern over the years will get justice, whether it's in the movies or on TV.
Right.
This could be a new golden age for us as Green Lantern fans. So
yeah.
Let's all just relax and see what is in store for us.
And what's it beyond knowing the characters and who we're going to be seeing, we also have some news from in terms of one of the executive producers, I believe he is Mark Guggenheim, right?
Yes.
He's recently done an interview. I want to say it was with Comic Book Now or comicbook.com, whatever site that I'm not 100% sure which one. Maybe Comic Book Resources. Again, I'm not sure which one, but I remember watching the video where he basically talked about um, the fact that they're approaching Green Lantern as a season of television, whether it be 8 to 10 episodes, however long it'll be, or beyond, who knows. But they're approaching it as a season of television with movie production values rather than, a 10-hour movie that's split up into 10 parts. And because he talks about, he finds that when stories are approached as, when streaming series and such are approached as, 8 to 10 hour movies, there's a lag kind of in the middle because he's found that because they've taken that strategy, there's a lag in the middle part of the story. So to avoid that, they're approaching it as, a season of television. And I think that's how it should be approached.
Yes. And, a couple of shows that I've watched that I'm a fan of in the last 10 years or so, shows like The Walking Dead, which is, of course, adapted from a comic book, and Lost. These are shows with a lot of different characters from a lot of different backgrounds, and they hop around. And so you're getting a lot of stories unfolding simultaneously. And I think with the backdrop of the Green Lantern Corps, it's not just about the Green Lanterns themselves. That are a lot. There are a lot of different planets and societies that are developing around them, and there are storylines happening around them. With the TV format, you have a lot of opportunity to explore what's going on around them, where it's not just a single narrative. And so I'm very happy that this is how I think the Green Lantern Corps, with all of its characters and its panoramic shot of a cosmic story, a cosmic backdrop, this is the way to go. So I'm very excited about this, and I think that the opportunities that they have here, our prospects are unlimited, and I'm very happy to see how this plays out.
Definitely. We wait with bated breath for more announcements. Hopefully, maybe by the end of this year we'll get some more news, but certainly into 2021 we should be hearing a plethora of casting information and news of that nature. So we of course will keep you informed and share our takes on whatever news comes out as it happens. But shifting over from the HBOMax Green Lantern streaming series.
And speaking of casting, here we go.
Yeah, we do have casting that may be Green Lantern related, coming from the Stargirl production. So, Donnie, what's going on there?
Well, the actress's name is Issa Panarejo. We know that she has been confirmed for the Stargirl series. The rumor right now, and again, we have seen this on several different sites, but we have not seen it confirmed by a reliable site yet, is that she is Jade, and that is Jenny Lynn Hayden, the daughter of Alan Scott, and at one time, she was a member of the Green Lantern Corps, that she's going to be the Green Lantern, or at least a Green Lantern representative on Stargirl in season 2.
Right. The reason that I wanted to bring this up, even though it's not, let's say, 100% confirmed by a trade per se, is that the site that I got it from, which is a site that is a network of sites that's directly their sole focus is DC TV, and usually what I've noticed is that their insider information that they've posted has more often than not that I've seen come to fruition. So that's why I thought it important to bring this to the forefront. Now, if it is Jade, I think that's a genius move. Not only because you and I had speculated on it, Jade probably being a likely candidate earlier on an earlier episode. I mean, that makes us look good, but it's not why that's not why I'm advocating for it. I just think that with you know with him getting the focus in the HBO Max Green Lantern show, I find it, not that it's impossible, but I would have found it hard to believe that Warner Brothers or Warner Media or whatever we're calling them nowadays, would allow, again, it's not impossible, but I find it hard to believe that they'd okay two versions of Alan Scott at the same time. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but Warner's and DC are picky about which characters get multiple representation at the same time in two different forms of live action media. So that I would have found it hard to believe that Alan would be in two places concurrently. And I don't think, Jeff Johns being, a continuity savant, let's call him, I don't think he'd go off the rails and say, okay, well, I'm going to bring in Hal Jordan, or Kyle or John to serve as the Green Lantern of this new era JSA that we're building on Stargirl. So that leaves really two logical choices to be the Green Lantern representation: Jade or Obsidian, right? And given Stargirl's penchant so far to have, a team that is predominantly female centric, Jade fits the bill.
Yes, she's 20 years old. I looked her up. Again, I'm not overly familiar with her body of work, but she does fit right in with the age group of the heroes that have been established in season 1.
Yeah. So I mean, it all makes sense. We'll await confirmation, but if it is Jade, I give it 2 thumbs up. Again, I'm not familiar with her, but one thing the DCCW shows have been pretty good with across the board is casting. So I am not going to start second guessing them now. I will give them the benefit of the doubt and have the actress be able to perform, and then I will judge her portrayal. Yes. But I think Jade is a great character, and it would be fantastic to see her in live action.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this: Jade is in my top 10 DC characters. I absolutely love that character. She was a longtime compatriot and love interest of Kyle Rayner. Mm-hmm. She was introduced in All-Star Squadron number 25 in 1983. Of course, she is the daughter of Alan Scott, and the character was just wonderfully developed over the years, and I've always wanted to see her in live action, and that gives me more hope that eventually we will see some version of Kyle somewhere. So I'm excited about that. And, again, I've just wanted some Green Lantern characters represented. It always seems like, at least since 2011, that with the DC shows, they go right up to, the precipice of where Green Lantern would be logically introduced, and then they go into another direction. It looks like finally this time we're going to see some of the Green Lanterns, their influence on the DC universe. So that is exciting.
I mean, Arrow gave us that tease for so long about with Hal Jordan's jacket, right? Remember that close-up of Hal Jordan's jacket?
Right, and Barry made reference to a pilot vanishing. So there have been lots of Easter eggs about Green Lanterns here and there, but they never actually introduced them. So,
and then there was the final. The final. Here's a tease for you guys, with John getting a Green Lantern ring, or John Diggle, sorry, getting
hopefully John Stewart somehow.
yeah. But getting what was either a Green Lantern ring, or a regular mood ring, or a glowing lollipop, in which case probably shouldn't eat it because God knows where it's coming from. But there was that. So, like you said, hopefully she is Jade, and I would just recommend her maybe not date Kyle, because that doesn't really end well for people.
No, and we're going to go into that later on, aren't we?
Right. So maybe diverge from the comic book and don't go there, because his girlfriends don't have the best of luck. But we'll get into that. So yeah, we'll hope it happens, and if it gets confirmed between now and our next episode, well, we'll confirm it for you. But before we get into more Kyle talk, let's and review comics, let's talk about some comics news. So what do we got?
Sure. We don't have much, but as far as the beginning of 2021, we've been given some information by DC. There is going to be a Green Lantern Corps comic book where the Green Lantern Corps has been depowered. And we know that John is in that. We know that Nort, of all characters, is in that. Kilowog is in that. We have seen that so far. We also know that in the Justice League title, there was an image of Joe Mullane. And so that makes me happy, because I've been wanting to see her survive beyond Far Sector. I thought the character had more potential. So it makes me happy that she's going to be brought into DC proper.
Absolutely. I think I'll just reiterate it, and I've probably said it on this show before. Right now, of all the titles featuring a Green Lantern, I think Far Sector is my favorite. And
it's really a wonderful book. And let me just say very quickly, people are wondering, some people are questioning why Joe, because she's so new. To me, you don't bring an association with someone like N.K. Jemisin. You don't bring her on board and not make the most of that, because that's been a big victory for DC, to be associated with somebody who is an award-winning science fiction writer.
Yeah. And again, not only is she a great writer, but people are seemingly responding to the character. So why would you not capitalize and continue to explore that character? Like, look at what's happened with Jessica. It'd be great if the same happened for Joe, right? So, and again, for this character, in general terms, for the character of Green Lantern, the mythos of Green Lantern, to continue to thrive, there has to be evolution, expansion, and change. It can't just be Hal, and then John, and then Guy, and then back to Hal, and then and wash, rinse, repeat. If we want this character to succeed as a brand, the more characters that gain popularity and more exposure and more longevity, the better it is for the mythos as a whole, and the health of the mythos to continue. So
I agree. Yeah, the more that we can develop characters, that DC should develop characters that can take hold in different places with different audiences. I think that's how you keep the Green Lantern mythos vital. And obviously, we haven't had much representation since 2011. So now's an opportunity to do that again and to introduce it in a different way. And hopefully you have different characters resonating with different people, and we can keep the TV show and some of the other opportunities. We can keep it going for years to come.
And again, this future state is not just impacting the Green Lantern; it's a line-wide thing. So, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the Flash, they're all getting, looks into their obvious, future, and there's a different Batman. John Kent, he's taking up the mantle of Superman. So it seems like they're taking elements of 5G and implementing them into this 2-month experiment. Now, before the people that are averse to change get upset and start yelling into the void, it's a 2-month thing. It's not a line wide permanent change. It's a 2-month experiment. If you're really that dead set against not reading it, take a break for 2 months.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this doesn't seem, if you don't like the story, and again, events happen like this. Some are great, some are not so great. But if you don't like it, I don't think it doesn't spell the end of your favorite character here.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the best thing that could happen from this initiative, in my opinion, is that DC develops if they see that certain characters, certain versions of these characters, resonate, right?
Mm-hmm.
If DC develops a secondary, future continuity, where a couple of the characters that are most resonant get books that continue in that version of events, that'd be great. Because then concurrently, the regular book could keep going. I mean, that's the benefit. And if it doesn't work, then they don't have to do it ever again.
Right. And so, yeah, like I said, I see this as opportunity to, create a little bit more positive buzz here.
Yeah.
And, they already had the plans. So it sounds like they scaled it back a little bit.
Yeah.
DC did. But they didn't just scrap everything and throw it out the window, because obviously they had some idea of something that would bring some interest in DC. And so, yeah, look, just, give them a chance, try to remain positive, remain optimistic, and see what they're going to give us in 2021. It's not like we have a lot on our plate right now anyway. So
yeah, and I think it's a better way of doing it than saying this is the new status quo for every single title for the foreseeable long-term plan. It's a 2 months experiment of let's try this and see what lands, if anything, and what doesn't.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, I'm excited to see where they go with that. And, 2021, there's a lot of possibilities with Green Lantern, both in print and outside of print.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's see. The thing is, the story is so big. There are so many characters. Hopefully, there'll be something that resonates for you somewhere.
Yeah. And like I said, if not, it's a 2-month break for your wallet.
That's a great way to look at it. You can go read something else and always, make sure you come back to Green Lantern, though.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
We have to say that on the Emerald Echo podcast. We definitely want you listening here, and we want you supporting DC and the Green Lantern mythos.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we'll be covering Green Lantern. We're going to cover this event from the Green Lantern perspective, and then on my network of shows, I'm going to be covering Superman, Batman, and all those guys, and Flash. I mean, so probably Donnie and I will cover Flash as well. So I'm probably going to cover a good bunch of these books. And again, if I love them all, great. If I love some and not others, that's okay too. And if I end up thinking it all stinks, well, in 2 months, my regular books will be back. So I got nothing to lose.
Right.
Except some money, but that's okay because I'm keeping some people employed, so it's good.
Right, yeah. And you could always trade it for something you like later on if you don't like it. So
right, exactly. The resale value, exactly. Yeah. Get them signed, and it becomes a collector's item.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So there. Yeah. All right. So that's it for the news. Let's get right into Kyle Rayner's continuing adventures as the Green Lantern. So where where are we going
We are
with
picking
our
up with
coverage?
Green Lantern Volume 3, number 54, going back to 1994.
Wow.
And of course, this is a very controversial issue. You've probably heard about it in the past. A big event happens, and we're getting ready to cover that. Um, this was, I'm going to read you all the people responsible for this story. The writer was Ron Mars, pencils by Daryl Banks, Steve Carr, Derek Acoin, I think that's how you say his name, Romeo
That's how I would
Tangle,
say.
yeah, Albert de Guzman, colors by Steve Matson, and editing by Kevin Dooley. And this picks up with Kyle and Alexandra DeWitt. Seemingly, they've gotten over their rough patch. They are back together again. We see Kyle flying with her in his arms. And, she finds his newfound responsibility and his, passion for being Green Lantern. She finds that attractive.
Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Yes. And so the story opens with the two of them spending the night together. She decides that, she's kind of all in, and she invites him to stay the night, which
She's lit up about this more than his ring. So I mean,
right. Yeah.
Nick of
So
that.
yeah, which, as a father, I would tell her, hey, that's probably rushing things a little bit, but the way
Right,
the
yeah.
story plays out is probably a good thing. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, they spend the night together, and then the scene cuts to a villain in this story who has been employed by the Quorum. They're a group responsible for eventually creating the Blood Pack. And we see that villain is a guy by the name of Clifford Zmek, known as Major Force. And things are not going to go well for Alex here. So we see that at home, back with Alex and Kyle, it's the morning time and she's taking a shower. And Kyle is seeing a series of bizarre events happening in Los Angeles. And he flies off because Alex is like, hey, you need to go take care of this. He offers to let her come with him. She declines, and she promises when you get back, there'll be a surprise for you. Unfortunately,
Well,
that's
she
very
wasn't wrong.
yeah, she wasn't wrong. And so we see that there's an earthquake in LA, and what's happened is there's this future city is coming into our Earth and causing through this rift, and it's causing this kind of cataclysmic event.
Mm.
And Kyle has to deal with it. And back at the apartment, however, Alex hears a knock at the door, and that turns out to be Major Force.
Mm.
So, what do you think of the opening couple scenes, Adam?
Well, first of all, I totally get, where Alex and the rekindled relationship. I totally understand that, and I mean they're mid-20 something people, so I mean them doing whatever we know what they're doing. I mean they're consenting adults, go for it, and that's cool. It's fine. Good for Kyle. Good for Alex. At least they had one last happy hurrah. And by the way, I was responsible for what pages, but man, Alex is pretty smoking.
Yes, yeah,
If she was a real person, she'd be on the list. But aside from all that, when we get to, I mean, first of all, like they're telegraphing. I mean, they tell you. I mean, if you've read this stuff long enough, you'll know the signs. Whether it's a TV show, a movie, or comics, when two characters are talking about how happy they are and how good their relationship is going, you know things are not going to end up well by
yeah.
the end of
That's a clue that something bad's about to happen to one of them at least.
like as an audience member of any kind of medium where this is happening, you're either yelling at the screen or yelling at the book. Shut up! Stop manifesting. Your positivity, because then it's not, like I said, it's not going to go well. I really did like the scenes where the futuristic LA or wherever is sort of melding with present day.
Yeah, that was a really inventive scene, and of course Kyle has a lot on his plate trying to deal with all of that. So
right, but I think in that scene you can see his some character growth there, and his maturity levels improving because he doesn't waste much time, in taking action and alleviating the situation.
yes, he's gaining confidence at this point.
Also, the artistic representation of the earthquake and the damage that this event is causing looked great. I must say, it was really, really evocative. You felt like you were in the middle of chaos. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It felt like a POV situation where you were there in the moment. So kudos to
and the name of the story is called Forced Entry, and obviously that applies to Major Force.
Dual meeting.
Yeah, but yeah, you can see that as, again, the city coming from the future and kind of crumbling on LA. So you can see the double meaning there.
Right. And then it's very creepy. The entrance of Major Force at the door, where he's in shadow and he's dressed as the flower delivery man.
Yeah, with his name Cliff printed on his uniform.
Yeah, and the card. I mean, this feels like you're watching one of those police dramas where you see the murder happen at the beginning.
Yes, and you don't understand it until they go back and explain the steps that went into it, right?
Yeah, it feels like you're watching one of those, so it was very well done. And the note that he puts in the flowers, I mean, what a creep! What a skin crawling, creepy, disturbing thing to do. It's very effective. I'm not going to say enjoyable. It's effective because I mean, watching her what happens next is not enjoyable as a fan, but it's effective.
Right.
So I guess we should get right to the next moments. Then.
Well, at this point, you probably have figured out what happens here. If you haven't read this, of course, Major Force.
It's 1994, folks. We're not putting a spoiler warning.
Right. Exactly. Hopefully, you're not going to be mad at us at this point, but he enters the apartment, and Alex, of course, she tries to fight back against him. Major Force, however, is a particularly powerful villain. He has dark matter energies. He has super strength. He is nearly invulnerable. She tries to fight back. She tries to cut him with a knife, and of course, that does absolutely nothing. He eventually gets on top of her and strangles her to death. And when Kyle returns home, of course, he is ready. He's able to save the city, and it returns to its correct time. He comes back home, and we see one of the most famous moments in Green Lantern history.
Infamous, really.
Infamous now, yeah. Depending on your perspective.
Depending on who you ask, yeah.
Right. He finds the and one thing I will say, it is gruesomely awesome, the depiction of Major Force choking Alexandra DeWitt. You can feel it. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but
it's done tastefully. Like it's not. I know that sounds weird.
Right.
You get tastefully choking somebody out, but you know what I mean. It could have been more gruesome and more. Let's put some blood and everything for the sake of shock value, and they didn't do that. But it was still effective, and like you said, you felt it.
Right, you felt it. I mean, and that's the choice to, and this is something that we'll get into when we get to the end of the issue here. The choice of who is going to be the victim here. Alexandra, as Daryl explained to us on the last podcast, she was an instant hit, and she was a very likable character. And so when you see her die here, you really feel that.
Right.
There's an emotional impact.
But also, when you think about it, who else are they going to kill from Kyle's life?
Yeah, we really hadn't met anyone
Yeah.
else from his life at that point. So
Yeah. So then, he comes home and
he comes home and he finds a note that says "surprise for you in the fridge." And of course, that he opens the refrigerator up, and that is the body of Alexandra DeWitt.
Okay, couple things. Shocking, yes. Disturbing, creepy, yes. All check mark boxes. But again, I appreciated the. It's always weird commenting in these ways on these things. The tasteful way in which this scene was depicted, because they could have opened the fridge full flung and shown for shock value, Alex's state crumpled and
Right.
and mangled and all that stuff.
Which was originally the plan. That was Daryl actually sent me a scan of the original artwork, which you saw her in there.
Yeah.
But DC was a little, the editorial was a little, worried about how that was going to come off, so they decided to close the door most of the way, which unfortunately had the effect of people thinking that Major Force had dismembered Alex, which didn't happen. But I think that's the reaction that people had at the time, was that he had pulled her apart. So,
but I think whether that was incorrect as it may be, it's more effective, because even if you're thinking that, it makes you hate Major Force even more as a reader.
Exactly, and that's the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, this was supposed to be,
because you don't know what state she was actually left in. I mean, she's dead. She's dead. So you know that, but you know what I mean. And I think it was more effective. But yeah, it's. He shoots up the villain ranking in terms of, I hate this guy.
Yeah, Well, between the end of Emerald Twilight and Kyle getting the ring, at this point, we just saw a few issues of Kyle starting to understand the powers of the ring and, having a good time. And, he and Alexandra, being young 20-somethings, enjoying one another and working on the relationship.
Right.
But this is what Ron Mars calls Kyle's Uncle Ben moment. And you can see the parallels there. Because now Kyle realizes the weight, the gravity that comes with being the last bearer of a Green Lantern ring.
Right, and he also makes that vow. I mean, it's a little bit later in the issue, or in the second issue, but we'll get to it later in terms of the Peter Parker thing. But what happens next is there's the ominous, like, I love the way this issue continues and then ends, because there's that end shot where it looks like so basically Major Force and Kyle begin their confrontation, right?
Yes.
In this issue.
Yeah, they basically fight out of the apartment. They, of course, fight through the wall, and they have a big fight outside.
Right, and then, so two things. You like the amount of rage, and justifiably so, coming out of Kyle is like off the charts. And I couldn't help but think, if the whole concept of the Red Lanterns was a thing in 1994, Kyle would have been prime candidate number one at that moment in time. Yeah. So the battle continues outside.
Right. And I should interject here, by the way, the quorum was after Kyle's ring. That's why they sent Major Force after Kyle.
Right. Yeah. So
Alexandra, she just kind of got in the way, and
yeah, she wouldn't reveal, details about Kyle, which infuriated Major Force.
Right. And you do see Major Force during the fight. You see him try to pluck the ring off of Kyle's hand, which doesn't work. So
yeah, it's very detailed. And then the ring seemingly dies, and there's a shot of Kyle coming, think that is dead, and then behind him, as Kyle is sort of on one knee, you see Major Force looks like he's about to apply a sleeper hold or a bear hug of some sort in the positioning that he was that the artist placed him in. And just a comment on the art of the way Major Force is drawn. He's essentially a purple Brock Lesnar, is how I describe him.
Yeah, purple and orange, but yeah, he does. There is a resemblance there, no doubt. Now Brock Lesnar wasn't around, or what he was not a WWE superstar yet in 1994, but
right, but hindsight, you can see that you can see the similarities, but what did you think of the way this ended, like that ending? How did you?
It was very surprising, but it made sense because eventually you had to wonder, with Kyle's ring, is it going to run out of charge eventually? Yeah. And how is he going to recharge it? Because, when Ganthet gives him the ring, he doesn't give him a battery with it.
Right. It's just, here's the ring. Have fun. Explore, learn it about yourself. I got no time for this. Have fun. You're on your own. So, I mean, is there anything else about this first issue that you wanna mention, or should we rate it?
Well, I just want to say, this issue, you may now hear the phrase "women in the refrigerator syndrome," and there was some criticism of this issue because they felt like, some people felt like it was sexist, that female characters were regularly killed off to develop male characters. Now, I would have agreed 20 years ago there weren't enough female heroes and prominent female characters in some corners of the comic book world, but Alexandra DeWitt was conceived for this role, and so I don't think the fact that she was killed was because she was a woman. And later on, I saw a quote from Ron Mars that, they killed her off because she was a supporting character, and this is what she was designed for.
Yeah.
But again, and plus the fact that, again, this was a pretty gory end for her. So, at the time it created some controversy. Now, for me, I thought it was just masterful storytelling because, again, it was gloves off. It was not, the easygoing Sunday morning comics type of story. It was, we're going to take Kyle and we're going to ratchet up the seriousness of this, and we're going to make you feel this. And that's exactly what Ron Mars and Daryl Banks and everyone who worked on this issue did, is they created something that we're still talking about 26 years later.
And I mean, there has to be, like, you can't just have a villain like Major Force come in and attack, but in the end everybody gets saved and everything goes back to normal, because otherwise it's just, like you said, it's being formulaic, it's playing it safe. And when you're trying to revitalize the Green Lantern book and mythology, you've got to go big or go home, and you gotta basically make the reader feel like, I gotta read this book because I don't know what's gonna happen. And that ending is a clear signal. Anything can happen in this book. People can live, people can die. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as calling it the Game of Thrones of comic books, but Yeah, I mean, there are stakes, and it's not just the tried and true formula of okay. There's the hero's girlfriend is in peril. He arrives just in time, and saves the day, and they ride off into the sunset, and everybody's all smiles at the end of it. So I appreciate that they took the risk, um, and that it was so shocking and ballsy, if you will, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Right?
it really kind of shook up the status quo for a while, and this was something that, again, this is why Kyle Rayner and the Green Lantern, which at one point was on the verge of cancellation, and I had that on authority from Ron Mars and Daryl Banks that
Yeah.
Green Lantern had gotten into the mid 40s as far as numbering goes, and it wasn't selling well, and you heard about these events and this new Green Lantern, and all of a sudden there was this renaissance, and it really did sell well for a long time.
Right. But if it had just been a new designed character doing the same things, month in and month out, as his predecessors, I don't think the book would have lasted.
It definitely wouldn't have had the impact that it eventually did have.
Right. Yeah. So with all that's it, should we rate it?
Yeah, you first, sir.
How did we do this last time? Was it art and story? Was it letter or not? Or
I think we just gave it a number.
okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, you go ahead first, and then I'll say my piece.
um.
All right, how about I'll go first?
Oh,
Okay.
I'm gonna sound like a homer, but I don't care. 10 out of 10. I loved it.
And see that's what I'm going to say too. It's going to be a while before I hit an issue where I don't think it's a perfect 10 because
I thought it was great. What can I do?
Yeah. Ron Mars is, and I'm going to say the reason the guy has been in the comic book industry for so long, the guy is a genius. Daryl Banks, one of my favorite all-time artists. Yeah. He's on my Mount Rushmore of creative talent. So there's very little that I don't like in the original run here. Now, later on, when we get towards the end of Volume 3, there's a few things that I might criticize a little bit, but early on, every Green Lantern issue was just a masterpiece from the end of Emerald Twilight, or really Emerald Twilight, for a long time. I mean, there was so much to like here.
And if people think this is us being homers, wait till we get to Volume 4 in the Jeff Johns run. I think it's
yeah, I like there too.
Good luck trying to get me to say negative things about that.
Well, again, full disclosure, Kyle Rayner is my favorite DC character, and every time, I don't know how many times I have read this run, probably over 10 at this point. It never gets old.
You have every issue memorized, don't you?
Oh, yes. I mean, like I said, it just never gets old. And no matter how many times I go back and read it, there's always new things that I'm realizing, and I see it from a slightly different perspective. And it is so much fun to realize this because there were so many elements back then that came together to make this landmark story. So I love this whole run.
So you're at a 10. I would venture to say you're at a 10 then.
Yeah. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I give it a 20. No, but no, I definitely give it a 10. I mean, it was Green Lantern fired on all cylinders for a very long time after this. So
right, yeah. All right, so then that brings us to 55, I believe.
Yeah, right? Issue 55, a story called Assault and Battery, and the cover is I actually have 2 issues of this signed, one by Ron Mars and one by Daryl Banks. And Alan Scott.
Excuse me while I write this down so I can steal that too. All right, yeah, continue. Yeah.
You actually see Alan Scott and Kyle on the cover, and you see an advertisement as well for 0 Hour, and we'll get to that soon. But Alan is going by the name Sentinel at this point, and he does show up in this issue. But before that, we see Kyle and Major Force continuing to fight, and of course Kyle's ring is dead at this point, so it looks like initially that he's dead. And when we had Daryl on the last show, I made mention of noting that in the first spread of this issue, there's the first page, and that is Major Force just kind of beating on Kyle. But then page 2 and 3, we see Major Force do what looks like a choke slam, and then an elbow drop, and then an overhead double arm choke, and a big Hulk Hogan boot.
Well, there was also a power bomb in the middle of the thing too, right?
Yeah, and that was one of the first things that I asked Daryl when I met him the first time. I was like, it looked like you were looking at wrestling moves for your inspiration for this, and he was like, definitely. In fact, he told me that I was the first person in 26 years who realized that the model that he used for the big boot to Kyle's face was Hulk Hogan, because Hulk Hogan does his kick, or he used to do his kick
he used to get his foot that high, not anymore.
Yeah, but he did it in a very definitive way. It wasn't like a martial arts kick. It was, I'm going to take this huge foot and just smash it into your face. And the way he would hold his arms and his body was very definitive. And so, and I realized that early on. I was like, I think he looked at Hulk Hogan for that kick that Major Force does to Kyle, and he confirmed that I was right about that. So,
and it's funny because as I was watching, as I was reading and looking at the imagery, I was just like, man, I mean, I don't love that Kyle's getting the crap beat out of him, but I'm loving the moves that Major Force is using to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Very different. I mean, you hadn't seen anyone in comics do this before Daryl Banks came along. So
it was literally one of the most brutal. I think it's up there as one of the most brutal fights I've ever seen in comics between the two of them.
Right. And and you see, Kyle tries to fight back even before he gets his ring recharged, and he rakes Major Force's eyes. He tries to gouge his eyes out.
Yeah,
I mean, it was very realistic,
Yeah, right. And again, you're not gonna. This is coming from I'm going to say this as a martial artist of since 1994. So I can say this. Not that I've been in many fights. I'm not John Peters, who's who thinks he's the most experienced street fighter, in the world of movie producing. If you listen to the stories he tells, but so I haven't been in as many fights as him. But as a practitioner of karate, I can tell you that if you're gonna encounter somebody on the street, and they're desperate to fight you or potentially worse, you're not going to have time to set up and say wait a minute and get into the perfect stance and do all this. There's going to be a point where all that flies out the window and you're going to have to get down and dirty.
And we definitely saw that here, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just got to say, going back to the big boot, at that moment, I thought, all right, I know it's based off Hulk Hogan, the big boot, but in this moment, Major Force is Hollywood Hogan because he's evil. So I had to mentally make that distinction in my head, because as somebody who, as a kid, loved Hulk Hogan, I could not read that with the red and yellow version of Hulk Hogan in mind. So I had to transition in my brain that it was Hollywood Hogan.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, that's a fair point. Although we were 2 years away from the NWO at this point. So
yeah.
So the fight continues, and of course, again, with Kyle with his ring depowered, he is nearly beaten to death by Major Force. But Major Force is actually carrying a green rock, which was a piece of Oa that had come with Ganthet, and that was picked up from the Heretic Club, from the alley behind the Heretic Club, and the whatever you want to call the man. I'm sorry, they don't ever name it. The wino, the homeless person who was in the alley. Mm. We see that he had delivered it to the Quorum, and Major Force is now holding it, and that transforms into what becomes Kyle's very unique power battery, and Kyle recharges.
Right.
And that's it's just, and that art, Kyle's body set when he gets the recharge is just gorgeous.
Absolutely.
I can't say enough good things about this art.
And then when he creates the electric chair, I love that.
That, I will say, that is my absolute all-time favorite Green Lantern construct.
It's one of the most detailed and best images I've seen in a Green Lantern book. It was insane.
I just, and you could see at this point, again, this underscores just how real this was. Kyle wasn't thinking about justice. He wasn't thinking about doing the right thing at this point. He was angry. He was trying to survive. And when he got Major Force at a disadvantage, he was ready to murder him. He was that angry over Alexandra's murder. And again, you didn't see that from heroes at the time very often, at least not DC and Marvel heroes. You saw it in, Dark Horse and Image and places like that. But this was something, Kyle, and he slaps him across the face and says, why don't you look at me when I'm talking to you? It was just the dialogue, the art, it was just so perfect. It's such a compelling moment in Green Lantern's history.
Is it wrong that I was reading that in Christian Bale's Batman voice when he was singing? Because I totally was. And then, the cops come and they're like, they instantaneously start putting the blame on Kyle. And they're like, release him from that chair and you got to come with us. And this is the benefit of being a Green Lantern, because Kyle's like, screw that. and basically flies off. Right?
Yeah, the Los Angeles Special Crimes Unit shows up just in the nick of time, because Kyle, he basically pronounces that he's ready to kill Major Force. He's like, I'm going to fire up old Sparky here, and I'm going to put enough juice into you that you die despite your near invulnerability.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, he was, like I said, he was, and this is a aptly termed, deadly serious in this situation. And also just to make another Batman reference, because I have to. But the special forces of the LAPD were about as effective as the 1960s version of the Gotham City Police Department. That is to say, utterly useless. I just thought I'd point that out. And of course, Major Force is like, check with the government. This is all, he's trying to have that get out of jail kind of free. He was trying to do some kind of get out of jail free card thing or whatever. But then we go back to Kyle's apartment, I think it is, right?
Yeah. Kyle goes back to his apartment. Obviously, he's very distraught at this point, and there's another surprise waiting for him, but this one is not a negative.
Yeah. He opens the light, and there waiting for him is Alan Scott. Now, the funny thing about this was, to go back to our earlier conversation about Justice League, I mean, take out the humorous bits, but this kind of gave echoes of the Flash, of Barry Allen meeting Bruce Wayne, where he's just sitting in the chair. I kind of had flashbacks to that. But I love Alan Scott's role here.
Well, and I like this issue too. I mean, a lot. Obviously, I mean, if I got 2 copies signed, this issue means a lot to me, because you see Ron Mars, who, by the way, is a student of comics. You would expect, he connects the past to the present, and that's what you see here. That's why Alan is his role in this story is to kind of give Kyle the backstory of the Green Lantern Corps. Now, I want to reiterate again, Alan's ring is separate from the central power battery. So even though the power battery has been absorbed by Hal at this point, Alan's ring is still working because it's powered by the Starheart. Yeah.
And we'll have to do a deeper dive on some Alan Scott stories.
Oh, fine with me.
At some point, but probably just before. Chances are it'll be as we. You know what? Once we hear of his casting in the show, we'll set aside some time to do a deep dive of Alan Scott comics. How about that?
Sure. The end of this issue gives you several pages that basically recaps the history of the Green Lantern Corps with Hal Jordan as the centerpiece, and you see John Stewart and Sinestro and the Star Sapphires and Arisia and Salak and Katmatui, and so you get this recap because again, 1994. The internet's just becoming a thing. It wouldn't have been easy for people who had just jumped into Green Lantern to know all that back history.
Right. Yeah, and I gotta say I loved it that recap because coming in as a new reader when I read it the first time, I mean it was years later, and again the only thing I had known was John Stewart being part of the cartoon. That was my establishment of Green Lantern. Actually, I think wasn't there some Green Lantern on Superman the Animated Series as well?
Yes, actually it was kind of an amalgam of Kyle and Hal.
Right.
They call him Kyle Rayner, but he got some of Hal's backstory because I don't think they didn't want to do Emerald Twilight. That would have been too complicated. But yeah,
right.
that was actually Kyle, yes.
Okay, so that was technically my first exposure because I loved Superman the Animated. I still love it, Superman the Animated Series. But so that was my first exposure, and then that was followed up with John Stewart in the Justice League cartoon. So my only exposure up to this point, when I was reading this story for the first time in the very early 2000s, was the cartoon. So these couple of pages, these splash pages that recount the history, were great because they were concise, to the point, and you could easily follow along. And the art was fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. There's that is a lot of fun to see
these flash
encapsulated. That's a lot of fun to see that. You go back and review that in a quick fashion. Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
These splash pages and the electric chair are easily my two favorite pieces of imagery from this issue, for sure. And then third was the first couple of images of Alan, because the way he was lit, darkly lit, and with the mask, I got Zorro vibes, and I like Zorro, so there it is. But no, the splash pages were great, and again, it's a great way to do it. It's a great tool for a new fan that had just started with Kyle's run.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, this is the perfect way to kind of, people who had just jumped in. And like I said, Green Lantern, it got a lot of press at the time. And, there was a lot of buzz in places like Wizard Magazine. And so for people who had just jumped in to Green Lantern, this was a good way to kind of go back and let them know what had happened previously and kind of catch them up a little bit. So you feel like, large story, which you were. So
yeah. And so, Alan is telling him that there's a bigger, to accept that, you have to accept you can't just get rid of the ring. I'm sorry that you've had this devastating loss, but in telling him all that history, he's like, this is a responsibility that you can't just throw away lightly. So, and we need you in the coming, there's a coming threat. There's Hal Jordan, which you have to be a part of assisting and helping us take care of, because you are the representation of the Green Lantern. So he's like, think about your next step. And he, Kyle asked for some time, which Alan grants him. I don't know how much time I can't remember how much time he's going to give him, but clearly doesn't have much by the end of the issue because of what we see. But here comes the scene where he's on his rooftop and he's sort of having a monologue, talking to Alex.
Yeah, very emotional scene. And again, like I said, you can feel these emotions here. It's not just a big battle in a narrative. You can feel Kyle's pain.
Right. And here's where he says, Alex, you would have wanted me to step up and assume this responsibility and do the right thing and be a hero. So I'm going to do it for you. This is we talk about how the similarities to Spider-Man. This is let me do it for Uncle Ben moment. I'm going to do this for you, right? this is a great power, great responsibility, acknowledgement.
Right.
Or this is similar to young Bruce Wayne at the foot of his bed, saying, I vow to strike fear into the criminal, the cowardly, and whatever the quote is. It's that kind of moment, right? And it's full of emotion, as you said, and that is the emotion that it brings forth. To me, is a prime example of the perfect relationship between great dialogue and fantastic emotive artwork, and it's all on display in these scenes. Yeah. And then there's a big splash ending, which features
Kyle suddenly coming in contact with Metron and Superman, and they show up and they need Kyle's help, and that leads into a big DC crossover at the time called 0 Hour. And we're going to save that for the next podcast because we're going to get into that, because that's where Kyle ends up. And so we're going to talk about that on the next podcast and let you know how Kyle fit into that kind of company-wide event before he came back to his own title. Right. But before we do that, obviously, we need to rate this issue. So
yes, sir. So I'm going to again say 10 out of 10. It just is that good, people.
It's amazing. I cannot recommend these issues enough. It has been collected in a couple of different ways. Most recently, it's Kyle Rayner Volume 1 and Volume 2. I really wish they would have gone forward and just collected the whole thing, because there's so much.
Volume 2 isn't on Comixology, though, I don't think.
Okay.
Volume 1 is, but Volume 2 is not there yet.
Oh, that's too bad.
So
I would really like a Kyle, just a big omnibus or a couple of them that just collects everything, because and I don't want to suggest that there weren't other writers at the time who there were a number of writers who did Kyle justice, but Ron Mars here, this is Ron at his best. And the reason the guy has been around so long, I mean, he's a legend in the industry, and there's a reason for that, and you see it on display here.
Ron Mars and Daryl Banks are essentially the Stan Lee and Steve Ditko of, for Green Lantern.
If you're a Kyle Rayner fan, those are two names. That's that's a good comparison. Like Stan and Steve. For Kyle Rayner fans, Ron Mars and Daryl Banks. That's your dynamic duo right there.
Dear DC, if you want more of my money, and it's not like you don't get enough of it, but if you want more, do a couple of hardcover omnibuses. Those big weighty ones that if I hit somebody over the head with it like a steel chair, it would knock them out.
The Blackest Night 10th anniversary that I got for Christmas last year.
No offense, I may have to carry it to your house, Donnie, and knock you out while I steal some of your stuff. But,
Great.
I'll try and do it in a way where it's not as bad. Just half an hour, just to let me get in and out of the house. With as much stuff as I can. No, I'm kidding, but no, I'm not kidding about releasing the volumes. I'm kidding about hitting Donnie over the head with it, but release the volumes as a nice hardcover. So it's a 10 out of 10 for you too, Donnie?
Oh yes, I mean, like I said, it's going to be a while before I feel like there are any issues with any problems. I mean,
there's going to be nothing below a 7, folks, from Donnie. I have a feeling.
Yeah, I mean, that's like I said, the story fires on all cylinders for a very long time.
If he gives anything less than a 7, all of our 5 listeners owe me $100, which would give me $500, which would be nice.
That's Shui, by the way. So there's my $5.
Yeah, there you go. But that's going to bring this installment of our Kyle Rayner deep dive to a close. But Donnie, I'm sure that some of our listeners may want to continue the conversation with you about all things Green Lantern. So if they want to, where can they do that?
Well, you can find me on Twitter as the Emerald Enthusiast. You can also find me on YouTube with the Vidcast from Multiverse Musings. That is Adam's Vidcast, part of the Multiverse Musings podcast network. And I actually do have my own YouTube channel now. I don't have a lot of videos there yet, but I'm putting up Green Lantern and other comic book product reviews there. And so you can find me there if you want to see some of the products that I have, some of my thoughts on those products. Right. And if you want to talk Green Lantern, just hit me up on Twitter.
Fantastic. And if you want to follow me, it's at Adam_LeithFan on Twitter. We also have a Facebook page, which is the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network page. Go there, request them into the group, and I will add you, and we can continue the conversation there. But that brings this to an end. We hope you enjoyed it. We will, of course, be back with more Kyle Rayner discussions, and you'll hear more of me and Donnie discussing everything from The Flash to the Ghostbusters to more comic stuff, specifically comics in 2021. But we will divulge those plans. They're not devious machinations, so don't worry. But we'll divulge those plans before we go on our Christmas hiatus. We'll let you know what's up, what's coming in 2021. Lots of stuff with me and Donnie coming. Donnie's going to be really busy. It's going to be work, eat, spend time with his wife, and then come and podcast with me. That's basically going to be Donnie's routine.
That sounds like fun to me. I can't get enough podcasting
for the foreseeable future. And before we leave, I should say that there is a moral of the story that we've talked about so far tonight. And that is that we will, as Green Lantern fans, specifically Kyle Rayner fans, we will hate Major Force forever. From the first time we open our refrigerator to the last.
That might be the best one yet.
So long, everybody.